Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a tier list, a short tier list of the economic viability of indie game genres. Let's start this off strong with an MMO. Do not make an MMO. Do you know how many MMO Kickstarters have came in and have just absolutely destroyed every single dollar of crowd-funded money they've given into or that was given to them? It's a lot of them. High barrier to entry, low player base, because hey, a lot of these MMO players are already playing the big three: Guild Wars 2, Warframe, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy 14. There's way more, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it's very hard to really make an established piece of this genre without you spending a gajillion dollars. And if you're an indie developer, you most likely don't have a gajillion dollars, right? Same with MOBAs. MOBAs need a lot of people. Because they need a lot of people, if your player count gets down to a certain point, death spiral, your game is done for. You need infinite content, you need multiplayer, 3D. It's very hard to make a MOBA. It's also in the MMO genre. Now let's go to the more popular genres for indie games, starting with roguelikes. I made a video recently on how roguelikes were the most competitive genre, and they are, but the reward is paramount, okay? Roguelikes are one of the most popular genres on Steam. They get a lot of exposure from YouTubers, streamers, everybody, yeah? They also are extremely easy to make. Game development is hard. I'm just saying this relatively speaking, you know what I'm saying? Procedural generation, right? Not too much text, not too much story. If you have a good loop and your game is pretty appealing to look at, look at Balatro. That's generational wealth. Hades, generational wealth. I mean, Supergiant, that's not possible. I mean, stuff like, I don't know, Binding of Isaac, generational wealth, right? There's a lot of good that comes from making a roguelike. JRPGs, like RPGs in general, I love JRPGs. My favorite genre. It's not that really economically viable, all right? Because, hey, you need a lot of text. You need pretty good writing. And good writing is very hard. If your writing is bad, that shit finna be refunded. And also, you're going to be competing with stuff like Undertale, Lisa, Omori. Not really good. There's a lot of AAA JRPGs out there too. Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33. So there's a lot of competition in this genre. Very high barrier to entry. But you can set your game at a higher price point because JRPGs usually have a lot of content. I mean, you're also competing with emulation too, so it still stays at the D tier. There's just a lot of competition and it's hard to make. Hero shooter, MMO tier. Why are we doing this? We are in 2025. Why are we still making hero shooters? We just have Marvel Rivals and Overwatch. Overwatch stayed because it basically dominated the genre. Marvel Rivals literally needed one of the biggest media properties in the world to survive for more than 2 weeks. So, obviously, any sort of hero shooter is obviously going to fail horribly. Horror, A tier, another indie staple. Like roguelikes and horror, like horror would have been an S tier if this was like a decade ago, but we're in 2025, so it's an A tier. Cheap to make, very good for streamers to pick up. It was way more popular in the 2010s, but you know how it is. Easy to make. You can create an atmosphere of horror without needing to break the bank, you know? You can be very stylized. You can use free assets. This is a very good genre, especially if you want to learn game development, right? Because you want to learn how to set a tone and atmosphere. Therefore, a horror game where the entire game is essentially tone and atmosphere is very good to improve your skills as an indie game developer. Metroidvania. See, this one's going to be crazy because look, there's a lot of successful Metroidvanias, but at the same time, I think it's like a D or F tier. Why? Because here's the thing, yeah? You're competing with stuff like, I don't know, Castlevania, Symphony of the Night, Hollow Knight Silk Song, Axiom Verge, Katana Zero. No, Katana Zero isn't a Metroidvania. That's my apologies. But anyway, there's a lot of competition here, right? And also, Metroidvania takes years to make, right? There's a reason it took 6 years for Silk Song to drop, guys. Because Metroidvanias, you need a lot of backtracking. You need good art, you need good gameplay, you need hundreds of rooms. More importantly, you cannot fake playtime with a Metroidvania. What do I mean by this? See, like a roguelike, you can very easily fake playtime on it because, hey, it has procedural generation. There's going to be novelty into it. If you want to add extra hours to your Metroidvania, you either, one, New Game Plus, you have to add new content, or two, make way more rooms for extra hours of content, which eats into that development and budget time. You know what I'm saying? It eats into your dev time and it eats into your budget. I think a Metroidvania is surprisingly F tier, especially with Silksong setting the price standard at like $20, which is surprising because Slay the Spire is worth more, and that's a roguelike. So yeah, Metroidvania surprisingly F tier. Another game that is here, I'd say an RTS. It takes a lot to make. I have to put it in D tier. Same with the JRPG. You're competing against really good classics. You know, your StarCrafts, your Warcrafts. Very big competition over there. Although there is some strength to it because the audience for RTS games, they skew older. And because they skew older, they usually have a higher disposable income, which means that you can sell your game for more, which is awesome. But you know, RTS is very hard to make. You need pretty good path. You need good path finding. You need a good story. You don't need esports. Okay, I'm so sick of every RTS game trying to be the next StarCraft. You ain't gonna be the next StarCraft unless people actually like your game. All right. So yeah, RTS D tier. It's possible. I feel like there is a chance for an indie RTS to be at the center of the market. It wasn't Stormgate, obviously, but you guys know how it is. So yeah, RTS D tier. Another genre that I would consider like a classic B tier is a bullet hell. You know, bullet hells not really accessible to like a majority of the casual player base. Yeah, but you know, bullet hells have some indie street cred. You know, Toho and stuff like that. Undertale because it had bullet hell elements. People like bullet hells. Not casual gamers, mind you, but you know, it's a genre that's very still in the indie mind space, you know. It's really cheap to make, you know. There's a lot of good bullet hell games out there, but there's still like a gap in the market that you can use in order to play rhythm games. My bad, bullet hell games. And I think because of that, it deserves to be a nice B tier, you know? It doesn't cost a lot to make. It has an audience. Of course, the price is probably on the lower side, but you know how it is. We can't have it all be good. Adult games. That's an S tier, ladies and gentlemen. We got Leisure Larry over there. Listen, there's zero competition. Right, guys? Because ladies and gentlemen, PlayStation and Xbox and Nintendo are not making adult games. A lot of absurd return on interest or return on investment ROI because you just need good art, you need good titties, you need good ass. You're there, buddy. You're there, ladies and gentlemen. Friend Slop is also a nice A tier. Peak era, it was like S, but now it's an A tier because people have caught up to it. You know what I'm saying? Um, Friend Slop, you play the game with your friends, absurdly cheap. It basically multiplies purchases because for every one person that purchases the game, the whole friend group has to purchase the game. Very clippable, very streamable. It's very awesome. Battle Royale. Battle Royale, we ain't doing no Battle Royale in 2025. Battle Royales will not be successful in 2025. We got Fortnite, we got Warzone, and they've taken up 99.9% of the Battle Royale players' free time. They will not play your Battle Royale game, no matter how good it is. Same on Open World. I don't have to explain why this is terrible for an indie game. It costs a shit ton of money. It's been done to death by AAA. You're not making it right here. You're not making this well. A deck builder. I guess this is also one of the roguelike deck builders. I mean, you put it in A. This is less of a genre and more like something you add to a genre. A deck building roguelike or a deck building Metroidvania. You don't really hear about deck builder games, you know what I'm saying? But it is a very nice addition to a game. You know, it adds a lot of novel replayability, adds more features for a relatively low cost, unless the game is like entirely based around the system and you added in post-production, so you have to remake the whole game. But that's usually not what most deck building systems do. Point and click. I'd say it's a solid B tier. C tier, actually. It's the perfect average, you know? There's not a lot of competition, but there's also not a lot of audience for it. It's pretty cheap to make, but you do need good writing for it, and good writing is hard. Like, it's the perfect happy place in the middle, you know what I'm saying? It's not like S tier like roguelike, but it's also not financial sewer slide like battle royales. I can't believe I have to say that word, but you know how it is. I want my money. City builders, base builders. I'm gonna use base builders as the example. You know, stuff like Factorio, Satisfactory, solid A tier. Why? Because actually, B tier. Why? Because base builders are really hard to make, well. You need to have a really good grasp of why people like it. But if you do, ladies and gentlemen, you have beaten the indie game. Why? Because, hey, Factorio, Satisfactory, they are very, very high priced for indie games, which means that you can price your game a little cheaper and still get a lot of return on investment. Thank goodness for the Factorio devs not discounting their game. They keep the value of not just their own game, but the whole genre on top. So you can price your game really well. Your audience has a lot more disposable income. Base builder games skew older. And overall, it's just a really nice genre if you want that long tail of constant purchases. You know what I'm saying? Yes, it is. Sports, F tier. It's not MMO tier because you could do stuff with sports, but you know, a lot of these indie game developers are like, I'm a sports ball type person. Haha, go sports ball. So you know, not a lot of appeal for the sports. You're competing with Madden and FIFA and all that. Sports games, if you're actually trying to do like a simulation, take a lot to make, but there is a market for indie sports games. I mean, I have a couple of indie sports games in my lobby right now, or well, library right now that I play. So yeah. Simulator games. I assume this is stuff like tycoons and whatnot. S tier. People love watching numbers go up. People love watching numbers go up. So if you make a simulator where the entire point of the game is to watch numbers go up, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have a lot of people that like your game simply because they like numbers going up. I said it a million times already. You know, simulator games pretty cheap to make. You can use free assets. You can use you know, recycled code and whatnot. You can do a lot of things with the simulator, like, you know, run a shop, or do this or do that. It's just a great genre to make. Action, any type of shooter like FPS. Is there FPS here? Why isn't FPS here? Yeah, any FPS game. I'm gonna have to say it's like a D tier, if not F tier, because you're competing with Battlefield and COD, and that's just too much competition to deal with. I mean, Titanfall 2 couldn't deal with the competition, you know what I'm saying? So, yeah, it's not good. And, you know, to top it all off, well, actually, we have like 3 more, because, you know, we have visual novels. Visual novels, they're a cool B tier. They're very cheap to make. The audience, it's basically point and click, but the audience for visual novels is way bigger than the audience for point and click games. But there's also more competition, you know, Danganronpa, Phoenix Wright, etc., etc. So yeah, visual novels at B tier, point and click in C tier. And I guess finally it has to be the 2D platformer. 2D platformers are an A tier, ladies and gentlemen. Because, hey, a lot of indie history comes from 2D platformers. Super Meat Boy, Cave Story, Celeste, etc., etc. There is a very sizable market for 2D platformers, especially if they're very speedrunnable. If your game is speedrunnable, there's going to be a lot of attention to your game because people want world records. You might get picked up by some speedrunning channels, Abyssoft, Carl Jobs, etc., etc. So, yes, 2D platforms are A tier. And that's going to be my tier list for the economic viability of indie game genres. You know, don't make these, make these. All right, see you guys. Peace.